So over the last 5-6 weeks or so, I have been wrestling through some back pain. And I'm telling people this is a milestone in aging for me. Because people ask me, hey, what happened? What did you do to your back? And I said, I sat down. I sat down for way too long. So we were coming back from spring break at the end of March, and we were just outside of Nashville, and we had a 15-hour drive home that turned into a 20-hour drive home, and it was getting up to Nashville and getting through Nashville that was the halfway point, and I knew that I was in trouble because my back was already starting to feel tight. We got out at the Buc-ee's outside of Nashville, which do yourself a favor when Buc-ee's opens up south of here, go visit Buc-ee's. It's my new favorite place. I might start driving to Kenosha or Racine just to get gas to have an excuse to go to Buc-ee's. And so I just knew I was in trouble because it was already starting to feel tight, and we were only halfway home. And we got home late on a Saturday night, or late on a Friday night, had all day Saturday, and I was just slowly moving around the house, came to church Sunday morning, and I could barely stand up. And it's gone up and down. I've had highs and lows in the last month, and I have a good buddy who's a PT, and he's been helping me, giving me exercises and telling me what to do. And I feel like by now, 5 weeks later, my back should be back to normal. So as I'm talking with my PT friend, my physical therapist friend, I'm like, shouldn't it be back to normal? And along the way, I'm asking him all of these questions, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's my spine, maybe I need to go see somebody else, maybe I need to do this. And this last week, we were talking, and he was giving me some more exercises, and I'm still asking questions, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. And his diagnosis is you have these muscles that are internal to your spine. They're small, and they support your spine. And he's saying those muscles are not activated, they're not working, and so your exterior muscles are working extra hard to try and compensate, and so we need to reactivate those interior muscles. How did I do? Is that a good job, Matt? That's great. So somewhere along the way, I'm still telling, I'm doubting his diagnosis, and I'm saying to him, maybe I should go, I don't know, see a chiropractor or whatever. And through our conversation, as I'm pushing back, he's like, I'm 99.9% sure that this is what's happening to you, and you should trust me. Brian, don't be a physical therapist. That you're not. Trust me. Because what he was noticing was that I was experiencing some measure of doubt because things are not moving as quickly as I want them to. Now, part of that could be my own problem. I'm the problem here, my own fault, because I went to the gym this week and I was doing squats, holding a 60-pound thing, and he's like, do you think that could have been a little too much for your back? And I was like, maybe it is mostly on me. But we have these moments where we experience doubt in all sorts of different ways. Doubt is something we will all experience in some situation, one way or another. You can doubt that certain outcomes might actually happen. You have a hoped-for outcome, and you might doubt that outcome. Like when the Bucs make it to the playoffs, and you think maybe this year they'll get out of the first round and they'll advance to the second round, and then they don't. You're like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen the following year either. Or you might doubt a report of something that you heard. I recently heard that Mod Pizza in the Village closed, and I was like, that can't be true. I love that place. And so sure enough, I had to drive by Mod Pizza to see that, oh yeah, in fact, it did close. It's sad, right? Oh, I think I heard it. Oh, yeah, I agree. And you might even doubt somebody's trustworthiness of their character. They seem really charismatic and kind, but you're like, is that all just a ploy or a game? See, doubt is simply this. This is the definition of doubt that we can work off today. Doubt is uncertainty that questions what's true, what's possible, or what's trustworthy. Doubt is just simply uncertainty that questions what's true, what's possible, or what's trustworthy. And within the scope of our faith, doubt usually surfaces around four different things. The first is the existence of God. There are plenty of people out there who doubt that God actually exists. They wonder, is there a God? I don't see evidence of a God, so I'm not really going to believe that there is a God. Some people doubt the character of God. If God does exist, they doubt his character in being loving and good because there's all this evil, destruction, and suffering in the world, and the question naturally surfaces, how can a good God allow evil and suffering in the world? Or sometimes people doubt the requirements of God. Like, what does God require to be in relationship with him and spend eternity with him after this life is over? People wonder whether or not Jesus is all that we need. And then there are people who doubt different doctrines of God, specifically the virgin birth. Could that really happen? Really? Did an angel really come to Mary and say, hey, you're going to have a child, and it's the Son of God? Did that really happen? And we have all of these areas of our faith that people naturally doubt, and we usually view doubt as a bad thing because sometimes we come across verses like this. This is from Matthew 14. When Jesus is walking on water to the disciples, Peter sees him and he says, hey, if it's really you, call me to get out of the boat. And Jesus says, get out of the boat. Peter climbs out of the boat and walks on water towards Jesus, and somewhere along the way, he starts to sink. And then we read in Matthew 14:31, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him, and he said to him, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Or we come across verses like this. This is in James chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. James is talking about trials and how we persevere through trials and having joy in trials. And he says, if any one of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. So sometimes we read verses like that and we assume, well, doubt is bad, and we assume that doubt is actually opposed and opposite of faith, right? And so sometimes doubt and faith are going to collide and create this big explosion because doubt is opposed to faith. But I would say it's not so much that doubt is opposed to faith. I would say the thing that's really opposed to faith is control. Control and having this lack of surrender, having a lack of humility, wanting to take hold of your own situation and not trust God, that would be more akin to the opposite of faith and something that's opposed to faith more so than doubt, which then that raises the question, is there another way to think about doubt? Meaning, can doubt actually do something for us? Can doubt be helpful in some ways in the development of faith? And if you've ever found yourself asking that question, if you've ever found yourself wrestling through doubt and wonder like, oh, am I losing my faith? I think our passage today is an encouragement to you to help view doubt in a new light that actually propels us towards faith. This is what we read. This is John chapter 20, starting in verse 24. We read, now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So chapter 20 of the book of John is the resurrection chapter in John's story. Jesus comes back to life, and then in John 20, he has 3 appearances to 3 different individuals or groups of people, each in a different situation when they receive the news and actually meet Jesus for the first time after the resurrection. And what we find is that the resurrection changes the emotional state of these individuals or groups of people when they meet Jesus after he has been raised from the dead. The first is Mary. She's grieving outside the tomb. The tomb is empty. The stone has been rolled away. She doesn't know where Jesus is, and she's grieving and mourning because Jesus' body isn't there. And we see that when she meets the resurrected Christ, the resurrection brings hope to her grief. And then later that same day, the disciples are in some room behind a locked door, and it says that they are afraid of the Jewish leaders because they just killed Jesus. What's going to stop them from coming and killing us? And Jesus appears to them, and the resurrection brings peace to their fear. And what we see here is that Thomas wasn't with them when Jesus appeared to him. And now we read this in verse 25. So the other disciples told Thomas, hey, we have seen the Lord. Basically, they're saying to Thomas, there's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason to be sad. Jesus has come back from the dead. Jesus is alive. And you might then expect Thomas, as the reader reading this, to be floored, to be overjoyed, to do backflips, to celebrate, say, what a relief, this is amazing news. But instead he says this. He said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Instead of being overjoyed, Thomas doubts. Basically, he's saying, I got to see it to believe it. Now, Thomas is an interesting figure because this is the third of four things that Thomas says throughout the Gospel of John. The first is in John chapter 11. Jesus has just received news that Lazarus, his friend, is dead. And he says to the disciples, hey, Lazarus is dead. We're going to go back and wake him up. And we're going to this place where Jesus was just opposed. And people start to pipe up to Jesus like, hey, last time you were in that city, in that region, they tried to stone you and kill you. Are you sure you want to go back? And he says, yes, you're going to see the Father's glory by me going to meet Lazarus. And Thomas pipes up and he says, well, let's go with him so that we may die with him. And at one level, it's like that kind of sounds like conviction, like we're going to do this. But at the same time, it kind of sounds sarcastic, doesn't it? Like, all right, we're just going to follow Jesus into our death. He knows that they're going to stone him, so let's just go with him. Okay, thanks, Jesus. And then from there, the second thing that Thomas says is during the Last Supper in chapter 14. Jesus is telling the disciples he's going to leave, and he says that you know the way to where I am going. And Thomas pipes up and he says, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so therefore, how can we know the way? And Jesus says to him his famous line, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And then here, this is the third of four, where he says, unless I see it, I won't believe it. Now, it's easy for us to be hard on Thomas for his doubt, right? He's known as the doubting Thomas. He kind of has this pejorative stereotype in his life. And it's like, Thomas, don't you want to believe? Thomas, don't you trust your friends? They have actually seen Jesus. Don't you trust them? But what we learn about Thomas through the Gospel of John is, one, he's not afraid to follow. Even though his comments in chapter 11, when he says, well, let's just follow Jesus, certainly we'll die with him. Maybe that is sarcastic, I don't know. But he does still follow Jesus, even if he thinks Jesus is going to be stoned when they go back and visit Lazarus. He's not afraid to follow. And then two, he's seeking to take ownership of his faith. Over the last 2 decades of following Jesus, I have seen countless numbers of my peers drift away from the faith and abandon the faith. And over the last 5 years, this term deconstruction has been really big, and people are deconstructing and maybe, hopefully, reconstructing their faith, but not always. And one of the things that I've wondered as I've seen so many people walk away is how many of my peers, when they were younger, orbited around faith. They orbited around church culture. They orbited around Jesus, but they didn't fully believe. Meaning, hey, this is just the way I was raised. This was just part of my family system. This was just part of my culture, my heritage, my legacy, but this really isn't personal for me. But what you see from Thomas here is he takes ownership of his faith. He wants to investigate. He wants to know for certain. He doesn't want to just take somebody else's word for it. He wants to believe it deep in his bones, and he's going to make sure he does. Which highlights what he wants is a faith that's real. Thomas isn't afraid to follow. He takes ownership of his faith, and he wants a faith that's real. Now, we've probably all heard of the story, The Velveteen Rabbit, right? This kind of classic kid's story. It's a story of this little bunny that's gifted to a boy on Christmas morning, and he plays with the bunny for a few hours in the morning, and then he gets distracted by the rest of the activities of Christmas, and he throws the bunny in a toy chest, and the bunny just lives there for a while. And somewhere along the way, he meets this toy horse. And what he notices about the toy horse is that the horse isn't just a toy, but somehow he's become real. But in the process, he's been all banged up and battered and hair ripped out, and he's got droopy eyes and joints that sag. And somewhere along the way in this story, there's a conversation between the Velveteen Rabbit and the toy horse. And the Velveteen Rabbit asks the horse, hey, what is real? And the horse responds, real isn't how you are made. It's the thing that happens to you when a child loves you for a long time, not just to play with, but really loves you. Then you become real. And then the rabbit asks back, well, does it hurt? Does becoming real hurt? And he says, sometimes, but when you're real, you don't mind being hurt. And it doesn't happen all at once, like being wound up, or bit by, or then the rabbit asks, does it happen all at once, like being wound up, or does it happen bit by bit? And the horse responds, it doesn't happen all at once. It takes a long time. And that's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily or have sharp edges or have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, your eyes drop out, you get loose in the joints and are very shabby. But these things don't matter, because once you are real, you can't be ugly except to people who don't understand. And I think that as that connects to our faith, what that highlights is if we want a real faith, like it's okay for our faith to get beat up a little bit. Like, it's okay for us to wrestle through things and have doubts and have questions and have uncertainties about what it is we believe, because as you work through those things, as you investigate those things, you begin to have a faith that's real because you've done the work to poke holes into it, to turn it upside down, to shake it around a bit. Because the truth is, like, Jesus can handle our doubts. Jesus can handle our questions. And what he wants is he wants our faith to be real, to be authentic, to be genuine, so that we can be like Thomas and say, okay, I will walk into hard things with you, even if I think it will cost me something. We learn all of this about Thomas, that he wants a faith that's real, and he's going to do the hard work to investigate, to ensure that what he believes is true. Now, go back to this idea then about doubt being opposed to faith. If doubt isn't opposed to faith, the question is, what is the relationship of doubt to faith? And I would say you could put doubt on the same spectrum as faith, meaning doubt might just be a precursor to faith. See, it's one thing to be skeptical. It's another thing to be cynical. The difference between skepticism and cynicism is skepticism is, hey, I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to check it out and figure out if it is. Cynicism is, hey, I know that's not true. There's no way that could be true, and I'm going to slander it to continue to prove to myself and remind myself that I don't believe that's true. Like, if we have genuine doubt, that skepticism that's postured in humility, it leads us to do what Thomas wants to do and investigate the things that we hear and see and people tell us to be certain that it is, in fact, true. And what we see in this passage, what the resurrection reminds us, is that Jesus meets us in our doubt. Jesus isn't afraid of our doubt. Jesus isn't overwhelmed by our questions, but Jesus meets us in them. And that's exactly what happens here. Verse 26, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas this time was with them, though the doors were locked. Let's just stop there for a minute. The previous passage, if you read what comes right before it, you will notice they were in a similar situation. A week prior, a different time, but a similar situation. They're in a room, the doors are locked. The thing we're told in the previous passage is that they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. Here, we're not told that, but they're still behind a locked door, which maybe highlights that true faith at some level, is a mixture of belief and unbelief. Because even though we're not told here that they're afraid of the Jewish leaders, like, why would they lock the door if there wasn't still a little bit of fear lingering? Like, they've seen Jesus, like they know that he's alive, but yet maybe just subtly they're still battling fear. It's like they come into the house, they shut the door, they start engaging, and then somebody just walks back and like, I'm just going to quickly lock that just in case, and then we're going to engage on. There's plenty of moments in the scriptures where you see that, where people are walking through this battle of belief and unbelief. And Mark 9 is a perfect example of this. In Mark 9, Jesus is up on the mountains with 3 disciples. He's praying on the top of a mountain with Peter, James, and John. He comes down and he sees this commotion. And in this commotion, the disciples who didn't go up with him are arguing with the teachers of the law, and Jesus asks what's going on. And this guy comes over to him and he says, hey, I brought my boy to your disciples. He's been possessed by a demon. The demon takes hold of him, throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth. He shrieks. He does all of these things. And I brought him to your disciples so that they might heal him, but they were unable to heal him. And then this guy says to Jesus, like, if you can do anything for us, please have compassion. And Jesus' response is, if I can do anything for you? He goes on to say, everything is possible for the one who believes. And the Father says back to Jesus, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. Like, sometimes it's not uncommon for in our life to be this mixture of belief and unbelief that we're wrestling through in real time. And Thomas normalizes that for us. And Jesus, again, seeks to meet us in our doubt, to keep bringing us towards a stronger faith. And what you see in this moment is that there are 4 things that pop up from this conversation that happens when when Jesus meets Thomas in his doubt. The first thing is that Jesus brings peace. This is continue on in verse 26. Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Now, that's the same thing that Jesus said the week prior when the disciples are behind a locked door, afraid of the Jewish leaders. Jesus comes in and he says, peace be with you. He's saying it again because on some level it's a common Jewish greeting, peace be with you. You probably heard from Hebrew, shalom, right? Jesus seeks to give peace continually. And peace isn't just tranquility. Peace isn't just the absence of conflict. Peace within a biblical sphere of things is this idea of wholeness, of restoration, of things being put back together to the way that God intended them. And within the scope of doubt, this idea of peace means Jesus brings clarity to those who are confused. He brings clarity to those who are confused. Clarity to those who are searching for what's better. I wonder how many of you have recently heard this song. Let's go ahead and play it, Jack. You put my heart back together. I searched the world till my head hurt just to find out your ways better. Oh, oh, your ways better. Oh, oh, your ways better. Oh, Lord, your ways better. Jesus, your ways. Anybody heard that song? Yeah, you love that song. I know you do. I played it for you, Fritz. This guy's name's Forrest Frank. He's like blowing up. If you are a parent and you need music to listen to with your kids, go listen to Forrest Frank. You'll be so glad. This song has been on repeat in our house, in our car for the last month and a half. And every time I hear that song, I think about what he says. Like, I've searched to try and figure out what's out there until my head hurts, he says. But your way is better. See, the peace that Jesus brings isn't just this absence of conflict. It isn't just tranquility in our lives. It's understanding. It's wisdom, that he has designed the world to operate in a certain way. And when we go searching for clarity and peace and understanding and wisdom and other things, at some point it's going to fail us and fall short, because Jesus has designed life to work in a certain way. And when we follow him, we find that it doesn't solve all my problems. Like sometimes there's still conflict and hardship, but it gives me a sense of peace and clarity that this story is headed in a certain trajectory. And in the end, everything will be okay. Why? Because Jesus has raised from the dead. Because he has conquered death. And therefore, nothing is impossible for him. Nothing is impossible. And if we continue to follow him, we will continue to have clarity around those things that don't always make sense. Jesus not only brings peace in this moment, but he also brings proof. Verse 27, then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe. See, sometimes people have this perception of Christianity and Christians that it's just blind faith. You just have to believe. You don't need any evidence. You don't need any proof. Just believe and things will be fine. There was a book that was written back in the 70s called Evidence Demands a Verdict. It was written by Joshua Dowell, and he has a son now, Sean, and the two of them have rewritten this book and expanded this book. And I think it's a great title of a book when it comes to understanding our faith and how we should be pursuing our faith, saying that it's not just blind faith, but there's evidence that demands us to give an answer to whether or not we believe that this evidence is true. There's a quote from the book that says, Christianity isn't based on blind faith, but on a reasoned examination of evidence. Now, the book is over 800 pages. It's a huge book. It's a massive book. One guy did a review on the book on Amazon. It said it took him 2 years to work through the book. But what that shows is they have highly researched and sought out answers to understand why the faith is what it is. And the starting point, they say, the best place to start for proof that what we believe is true is the resurrection. They say that the resurrection is the most documented, well-attested event in ancient history. It's one of these issues, it's one of these things that has changed the course of human history, changed it forever. And if you, in those moments when I wrestle through different things about what I believe, I always go back to, if the resurrection happened, it changes everything. If Jesus did in fact rise from the dead, it changes all of human history forever. It's the most well-documented event in ancient history, they say. And Paul speaks to this too. Paul speaks to this in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, for what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day, according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, who's also known as Peter, and then to the 12, and then after that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living. And then Paul goes on to say, and if the resurrection didn't happen, we are those who should be the most pitied of all people on earth. The resurrection changes everything. Now, we don't get to see a firsthand account of the resurrected Christ like Thomas, but what we get are eyewitness accounts who have passed along the story of Jesus from one generation to the next to the next. Another proof that we're given is the transformation of the disciples. They went from fearful doubters who locked themselves in a room to courageous missionaries and witnesses who changed the world forever. When you look at the consistency and the coherence of the Scriptures, how it was put together across generations, across time periods, and the cohesion of it all, it's a masterful work of art that isn't just something somebody wrote down one day and kept going, but it's written here and there, and all of these pieces come together, creating one consistent, cohesive narrative. People who weren't even alive at the same times writing this story and writing it clearly. And then you think of the spread of Christianity, despite its opposition, despite its persecution, moving all across the globe. this book documents all kinds of these amazing proofs that exist for why Christianity is a reasonable belief. And Thomas here needs that one sign of proof, and then he believes. Jesus brings peace. Jesus also brings proof. And then the thing that Thomas does is he proclaims. It leads him to a proclamation. Thomas said, verse 28, "My Lord and my God." Now, what's interesting about John's gospel is that there aren't too many proclamations in John that Jesus is God. There's a lot of discussion about God, and there's a lot of discussion about Jesus' claims that he's God. But if I'm reading the gospel correctly, there are only 4 moments where there are 4 proclamations of somebody proclaiming that Jesus is God. The first is John the Baptist in chapter 1, when he says, "There's the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." The second is Nathanael, who also is a bit of a skeptic, because some of his friends come to him and say, "Hey, we found the Messiah. He comes from Nazareth." And his first response is, "Can anything really good come from Nazareth? I mean, really, that place is kind of shady, a backwater town. The Messiah is really going to come from there?" But then he meets Jesus, and he says to Jesus, "You are the Son of God." And then there's Martha. When Jesus goes to raise Lazarus from the dead, she says, doubting that he can do it, "Jesus, I know you're the Messiah. I know you're the Son of God." And then here in chapter 20, when Thomas says, "My Lord and my God." You have 4 proclamations. And John's whole point of writing this book to begin with is so that we too would make that same proclamation. Right? If you jump down to verse 30, he says this is the whole purpose of the book. "Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and by believing that you may have life in his name." And so the question for us is, can we make that proclamation? Do we have enough of our doubts answered? You may still have lots of questions. You may not understand it all, but can you at least say, "I know that Jesus is the Son of God. He did, in fact, die for our sins. He was, in fact, buried. He did then rise 3 days later, and now he is ascended at the right hand of the Father, ruling and reigning over all things." Can you make that proclamation that Jesus is the Son of God, Lord of all? And if you can, that's great. And you may have all of these other questions, and it's okay to have those, and it's okay to wrestle with those. And if you're at a point where you're like, I don't think I can say that, we would also say, that's an okay place to be, but keep seeking, keep searching. Be a skeptic who's humble. Don't be a cynic who's arrogant, but say, I still desire to figure this out. And my hope is, for those who are still seeking and searching, that what they would see, the evidence that they would see, maybe isn't the resurrected Christ, but it's the body of Christ, as we are the church, working in a way that demonstrates to this body and the world the love of Jesus. And that they would know that God is alive and well because of the way his body works together. And what people would then meet is the person of Christ, the Spirit of Christ, through the church in their doubts, because Jesus meets us in our doubts. And we, as his followers, have the opportunity to demonstrate who he is to the world. And then lastly, what you see in this passage is that this proclamation from Thomas is personal. Because he says, my Lord, my God. I think the only other person in John who makes it that personal, saying, my Lord, is when Mary is at the tomb and she says, where have they put my Lord? I don't know where he is. This has become very personal for Thomas. And the question is, how personal is it for you? Where are you at in your journey of discerning who Jesus is, what he has done for you? The fact that he has raised from the dead, and he has initiated a process of making all things new. Jesus meets us in our doubts. So wrestle through those doubts so that you can have a faith that's genuine and real. And one of the ways that Jesus meets us in our wrestling is through the Lord's table. It's through the communion meal. It's Jesus' body broken for us, his blood shed for us. It's a reminder of who he is and what he has done for us and how he loves us so much that he has given everything to redeem us. So I can think of no better way to respond to this message than to go before the Lord's table. And if you're in a place where you can make that proclamation, Jesus is the Son of God who has given his life for me, this table is set for you. If you're in a place where you're like, I don't know, I'm wrestling, I don't know what to make sense of this, it's okay not to come forward. Because what we're saying when we come and take this meal is that I will follow Jesus wherever he sends me, wherever he goes. I too will go because I have a sense of certainty that he is the Son of God. And in this, even if we're still wrestling with things, even though we say he is the Son of God, he meets us in this moment to remind us of his love, his goodness, and his mercy.